Welcome back. Today, I want to discuss the panic in the Washington state bureaucracies and the entire administrative state in general, with kind of a focus on why Washington state's Department of Licensing, they may be in very serious trouble here, and the bureaucrats who work there, they absolutely know it. So this is really a video about how the Trump presidency, and more specifically the Department of Government Efficiency investigations, are basically kind of tripping into Washington state, rippling into our state. And the bureaucrats and the grifters here are probably justified right now to be in panic mode all about it. Now, before I get to Washington State's Department of Licensing and the scandals yet to be fully exposed, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below if you haven't already done so. I can't tell you with absolute certainty that our bureaucrats and most of our political class watch these videos, but I guarantee they don't want you to see them. And most of the videos that we produce on this channel are certainly kryptonite to our bureaucrats. So sometimes the best way to actually spread the word is also just to share these videos with others who you believe may actually be interested or should be interested in knowing what is happening where we live in the great Pacific Northwest. Now, back to my home state of Washington, I confess that the origin to this video topic today actually came from the rumblings and kind of rumors of people who work in various state agencies in Washington state. Now, I live in Thurston County right here, which is home to our state capital, and it's actually the county which contains the majority of the people who are employed by our various state agencies and support systems which kind of keep the creaky wheels of government greased and rolling forward. Unfortunately, they're often crushing our future and our freedoms at great expense to our wallets along the way. Now, despite the frequent conflicts that I've had with various state agencies and the government grifter class over especially the past 15 years or so, Thurston County is actually just a great place to live, especially if you want to find whistleblowers and others who work in these state agencies and who can actually report what they witness or hear from the inside. Now, I find it helpful to work with whistleblowers when they have information that actually exposes the corruption, the fraud, the waste, and the general day-to-day operations of government that might not be exactly what the average person thinks our government should be doing. Now, I'm hearing rumors from inside Washington State's Department of Licensing that clearly indicate a high degree of tension and panic in that kind of black hole of bureaucracy. And while I'm not sure that I can yet quantify the true volume of public records destruction and the mass shredding that may be going on there right now, I can report that the partisan leadership who actually run that agency, they're extremely concerned about a federal Department of Justice investigation, or probably more likely a litigation that may be coming their way very shortly. Now, what are they actually concerned about? Well, let me just dig into this and explain. Now, first, last week, the Federal Department of Justice here, they had a lawsuit that they had filed against New York State for, among other claims, illegally issuing driver's licenses to illegal aliens. Now, this was part of a broader lawsuit against the state of New York for their sanctuary state laws that hinder the ability of the federal government to properly enforce immigration law, and which have basically served as cover for violent criminal gangs to operate with impunity in that state, and of course impact the various states that are around New York as well. Now, why does this matter at all here to us in Washington State's Department of Licensing? Well, it's actually quite simple, and even an Evergreen State College graduate here can probably understand this. The New York case matters, and it matters because everything that the Federal Department of Justice is accusing New York State of doing in that lawsuit that they filed last week, it's exactly what has been happening in Washington State, specifically at Washington State's Department of Licensing for decades now. Now, frankly, in my opinion, in Washington State, the rot and the illegal activity in this specific agency, it actually may be far worse than what the feds believe has been happening in New York. But let's get more specific so that you can understand what has been happening in Washington State's Department of Licensing for decades now, and it has only gotten worse, in particular, over the last 12 years. Now, the bad behavior at Washington State's Department of Licensing appears to essentially be broken down to three broad categories of probably just very illegal activities. The first is the illegal issuance of Washington State's driver's licenses to illegal aliens. Now, in some ways, this is just part of what a government does when it claims to be a sanctuary state for illegal alien criminals. But this is a very tangible legal problem for Washington State because it is so pervasive here. The second issue, which is kind of related to that, is actually registering non-U.S. citizens to vote and essentially laying the foundation for an entrenched and very practical key first step to facilitate voter fraud on a pretty large scale. And then finally, the black hole of incompetence from various former and current employees who worked for that agency in recent years have essentially raised significant concerns over ID theft, fake ID operations, lack of security for the data this agency collects. Like, for example, your signatures on your driver's license and other related unprofessional behavior at this agency. I mean, does anybody seriously dispute the fact that this agency has leaked every bit of your personal private information, either willfully or through basic incompetence, allowed it to be hacked for many years now? And while the problems at this agency, they predated the Inslee administration, the bad behavior here only accelerated after Governor Inslee fired the former director of this agency in 2018 for complying with federal law and actually providing information to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE, which was required by law at that time and still is. Now, this created some drama inside the state agency back in 2018 as Governor Inslee's office intervened in the Department of Licensing more aggressively than normal. And according to inside sources at the time, generally bringing in political hacks to replace the more professional and experienced bureaucrats who simply just wanted to follow the law and do their job. Now, this internal purge has resulted in the agency that we see today with basically no transparency, politically mismanaged, far less professional, and clearly operating in an illegal manner for many years now. Now, in fact, I doubt anyone in leadership of this agency even knows how to operate it in a sane or legal manner at all. Now, until a few weeks ago, frankly, I just would have presumed, just like all the corruption and incompetence that I witness in government on a regular basis, that this agency would just continue to blunder and bumble along down the road with their typical bloated, very expensive and incompetency. And then, of course, their failures with nobody really able or willing to fix these obvious problems and corruption. I mean, this is the cynic in me, frankly, and based on decades of experience, I rarely believe things change very quickly. However, times, well, they may actually be changing right now, and here's where the political drama gets, the stuff that we're beginning to see right now. Now, first, as widely reported last week, the former, very forgettable, and nearly invisible U.S. attorney in Seattle was fired from that office right after Pam Bondi was signed in or took her oath of office, and then has been now temporarily replaced, and I expect a permanent replacement to happen before too long. Now, I'm not really sure how much house cleaning they're going to need to do at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Seattle or Spokane, but I'm presuming that that could happen as well. However, this event right now, combined with this recent New York and related Illinois lawsuits, it actually sent shockwaves through the Washington State Department of Licensing, because that nest of bureaucrats, they know that they're probably next, or at least close to next on the litigation target list, basically because they've been naughty for many, many years now. Now, it seems doubtful that Bob Ferguson's press conference here last week, where he blustered that he would stand up to Trump, that will really intimidate anybody in the federal government who might be looking at the corruption in Washington State that's just begging to be exposed. Now, keep in mind, from just a pure power player perspective, in every way, both Illinois and New York are certainly far larger, more powerful, and way more politically connected than our state of Washington. And don't get me wrong, I love Washington State, and for me and my family, it's the center of the universe to us. And I'm very proud to call it home, but I fully realize that to the real power players in our nation, regardless of their political persuasion, I live from their perspective in backwater USA. So the obvious message to the bureaucrats in Olympia, with the two bigger lawsuits recently filed against those big and powerful states, is that a similar lawsuit against Washington State is actually pretty small potatoes and almost an afterthought compared to the legal drama that's unfolding back east right now. Now, here's where the drama can also get very tricky, and I think it merits a basic discussion about the optics of this likely investigation and lawsuit. Now, first, both the Washington State Department of Licensing and the Washington State Attorney General's office, they actually share the same exact building in Olympia, not far from the state capitol. It's this building right here. It's not many people actually realize this, but since I had to file a lot of legal documents and pick up public records requests here quite often over the past decade or so, it's been very clear that these two agencies, distinct in theory, they actually are joined at the hip. They share elevators, they share a lobby, building lobbies, and it isn't really hard to walk down the hall from one agency on one side of the building to the other. So why does this matter? Matters because our new governor, Bob Ferguson, he's been running Washington State's Attorney General office in the same building right next to the Department of Licensing for the past 12 years. And while I realize that he only traveled to Olympia on rare occasions when he was forced to leave Seattle for press conferences and other self-promotion events, there's absolutely no way that he can honestly pretend that he wasn't clearly aware of the illegal activity that was going on regularly just down the hallway from where most of his 800-person in-house attorneys actually work. Now, everyone has been in on the con game, and they're all well aware of the illegal activity just down the hall. Even if they choose to look the other way while it continues, they know all about it. So if you happen to sense a little uncertainty or concern in Governor Ferguson's behavior over the past basically month or so, it's because, well, he may very well be corrupt to his core. He really isn't a total idiot, and he knows that a legitimate and serious investigation of the Washington State Department of Licensing will absolutely expose a lot of bad stuff that reflects poorly on him, and it will cause him some real problems in the very near future, and Governor Ferguson absolutely knows this. Now, complicating this issue even more is the fact that Nick Brown here, the recently elected Washington State Attorney General, who has essentially replaced Bob Ferguson in that office, he's also very aware of the illegal activity happening just down the hallway from him as well right now. Now remember, even though Nick Brown's stint at the U.S. Attorney's Office under the Biden administration was relatively short and it was easily forgotten, one thing you get when you're in that role is you get read in on a lot of inside information about the public integrity investigations that are not moving forward in Washington State. So the Biden administration certainly didn't want to look very closely at Washington State over the past decades or years, considering how much money they fundraise from out here. I mean, that's essentially what Washington State is to them. And there is a long history of not looking too closely at the shenanigans in the Evergreen State when it's convenient for you. But now with Trump's election, and more critically with just this obvious drive and very rapid pace of the Trump administration's appointments to key positions like AG and U.S. attorneys around the country, it would actually be a great mistake for the political grifting class in Washington State to just assume that this time's going to be just like the last sleepy and slow start to Trump 45 administration. Nope, I think this time it really is different. And the Washington State Department of Licensing, they absolutely know it. Nick Brown, our new Attorney General, he knows it. Bob Ferguson, our new governor, he knows it. And the real political powers in Olympia, they know it as well. Now, by the way, if the Ferguson administration could just throw a few loser senior bureaucrats under the bus and then blame them for all the legal woes of the agency long out of control, I'm sure that they would do so, and I'm sure the short list of sacrificial scapegoats that are already being discussed behind closed doors right now in Olympia. However, the problem with this typical strategy of bureaucratic shift the blame game is that any Department of Justice investigation of the Department of Licensing can't help but fully expose the voter fraud operation that the Department of Licensing's illegal activities have long facilitated. So listen, everybody on the inside, they certainly know about this. Our newest Secretary of State, Hobbs, he's well aware of these problems, even if his political affiliation with the Democratic Party it imposes a code of silence. However, if push comes to shove, I can't see the independently elected Secretary of State Steve Hobbs here falling on his sword for Governor Bob Ferguson any more than Hobbs was actually willing to violate the law last year over the 3 Bob Ferguson filing week event. And that was when Ferguson actually tried to induce Hobbs here and threaten him to break the law back then. Hobbs didn't do it. So the question is now the full dimensions of a true exposure of the hundreds of thousands of likely illegal voters registered through the Washington State Department of Licensing. It's just a matter of policy, basically using the fig leaf interpretation and excuse of the sanctuary state structure and then motor voter laws. it could be more impactful, I think, than most people might realize. And keep in mind, this doesn't mean that every one of these non-U.S. citizens who were registered to vote actually voted. But we absolutely know that some have inevitably done so, and if the Department of Justice goes public with their findings, everyone in the country will be able to see this as well. It won't be an open secret any longer. It will be as public as a DOJ audit of U.S. aid. The risk factor to the political establishment in Washington state is very significant, and it's actually more than just the criminal liability or the bad optics and maybe some bureaucrats who lose their jobs. If it was just that, I don't think they'd care. But in case anyone can't see it yet, it seems pretty unlikely that the Republican Party benefited from this mass illegal voter registration operation. So it appears to me, at least at this point in time, that the bureaucrats are actually trying to circle the wagons and survive the coming legal storm. I mean, the people likely to become the fall guys, some of them are probably planning for an early and quick retirement right now, and others are probably destroying whatever evidence they can hide from the future inevitable investigation. However, like all sinking ships, it actually seems impossible to plug every leak. So it might be wishful thinking to imagine on their part that they can actually cover up all the corruption and illegal activity at this agency. For the honest employees at the Washington State Department of Licensing who are observing this drama and who might be aware of where some of the bodies might be buried or are currently getting buried as I record this video, please make sure that you have your plan to expose the truth somewhere in place. Now, if you have documents, hard drives, or other information that you want put in safekeeping, feel free to send them to me at this address right here, and I'll do my best to get them into the hands of the proper authorities when the time is right. If you actually have documents that should be made public right away, and I agree with your assessment, I can help you with that as well. As always, nobody needs to know who exposed the truth, and I'm sure your senior leadership at the Department of Licensing will appreciate the spotlight that I can help shed on it. Now, that address there that you saw on the screen, by the way, you can also find that address in the video description down below, as well as on my website. They won't let you drop off packages in person, but you can mail them. Now, I try to close every video with something that you can do to make an impact. And I encourage activism, effective activism, as much as possible. I believe this is just a part of civic engagement, and most people watching this video won't be insiders or prospective whistleblowers. But other than just being informed, what can I actually tell you in this video today? Well, partly, I want to reiterate the importance of everyone continuing right now to log in during the legislative session here and comment on some of the exceptionally stupid bills that are being proposed in Olympia right now by our panicking elected officials. Most of these are bad ideas, and your voice in opposition is far more helpful than you can possibly realize. I'm seeing the sheer volume of opposition to some of the stupidest ideas actually change the direction and help kill many of these dumb bills. So please keep in mind a lot of the flurry of insanely dumb ideas that you're witnessing in Olympia, it's actually the political equivalent of a child's temper tantrum. And they merely represent a physical manifestation of anger, angst, and kind of powerlessness of people who recognize that their anticipated grift operation might be vanishing before their eyes, and their political power might be in jeopardy because, after all, their historic success at diverting your tax dollars to fund their political allies, well, that just might be getting more difficult in the very near future now. Now, we really do live in interesting and unusual times. The cynic in me actually truly didn't expect to see this right now, but I can't deny that what I'm seeing in D.C. and the rapid pace of exposing the truth is inevitably coming home to Washington State very soon. It won't be easy to keep up with the news and the drama, but you don't need to look back in a few years and then realize that you did absolutely nothing to help. As I always say, you need to engage and do something to make a difference. And the simplest thing that you can do right now for the next few months is just make your voice heard on the crazy and dumb bills in Olympia. I produced a video a few weeks ago on how you can comment on these bills. I'll link to it down below, and I'd encourage you to do so. To make a difference, you have to be willing to do something. You have to be willing to show up, because the future belongs to those who show up.